Yo, what's up, chefs? It's Vinny, and this is going to be an extremely detailed guide to my Flicker Strike Invoker that is currently annihilating all the content in the game. Just see for yourself. So now I'm going to try and keep all the mobs on this side. Flicker Strike. You know, massive Flicker Strike there. And I mean, that is why the build is so addicting. Alrighty, well, I hope you guys enjoyed the intro, and first things first, I'm going to do things a little bit different this time around. I'm actually going to start off with just a brief live demonstration of a super juiced up map. I'm going to follow that up with a live demonstration of T4 Zesht as well, so I can sort of just explain the core gameplay loop of the build for both a mapping and pinnacle boss scenario, kind of go over my thought process, maybe give some tips and tricks, stuff like that. Feel free to let me know if you guys want me to include a section like this in future build guides down below in the comments. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and do this canyon map down here. It's pretty juiced up by these two towers. And as you can see, the map is obviously quite difficult. 36% delirious. It's chaotic rarity omen. And on top of that, it's got the prefix vertebrae, which is obviously a good thing. So it is a pretty juicy map. I'm not gonna pick up any of the loot because I'm assuming you guys are not interested in watching me, you know, do a pick up loot simulator, so to speak. I'm really just gonna run through the map. Might not even show the whole map. It kind of depends, but I'm just gonna go ahead and blast through it without worrying about the loot. So first things first, starting off with the map, you're actually gonna just be using Stormwave, and that's gonna be building up energy for this Reaper invocation up here in the top. You can see it's a meta skill gem. Within that, we have Profane Ritual. As that's built up, I can now use it, and that's going to automatically, or I should say it's going to auto-aim cast some profane rituals, which is going to give me my power charges, which of course I need those for my charge staff as well as my Flicker Strike. So there we had a delirious mini-boss, or whatever you want to call it, and he got annihilated by the Stormwave, which is not usually how we play the build, and it's not usually how I'm killing them, but moving forward a little bit, once you have your charge staff active, which you do that by killing the first couple packs and then using Reaper's Invocation, that'll give you your power charges. You get charge staff running. Then you can just start using Reaper's Invocation to get more power charges, which is going to let you use Flicker Strike. And then once you use Flicker Strike, you can use Reaper's Invocation again. I'm back up to max power charges. And then if you want, you can just kind of like walk around and then, you know, look for a good opportunity to Flicker Strike. You can weave in some storm waves here and there in between the Flicker Strikes. That's obviously going to be more efficient. Although this is a Flicker Strike build, you know, as you start to play the build, you'll start to realize that not every situation is like a good situation to use Flicker Strike. If there's like 5 mobs and they're not connected to another big pack of mobs or whatever, you know, like right here, for example, I wouldn't want to waste my power charges on this group of 4 mobs. Rather, I should just use Stormwave, get some more power charges, keep that stacked up, reapply my charge staff, and then, you know, I'll keep moving. Now I'm going to kind of like blast through it a little bit so you guys can get an idea of, you know, how effective the build is, so to speak. Here we go, just going to keep blasting through. There we got a pack. So like this is a good area. We've got the abyssal section. So now I'm just going to go into Flicker Strike, and I'm just going to blast through the whole thing pretty much. Now there's like a bunch of mobs, right? But it's not a big deal because you just roll out while using Reaper's Invocation. Very simple. And then you just Flicker Strike again. Very, very simple. And, you know, if you've ever got like a leftover rare like that, you just finish them off with Stormwave. Absolutely no problem at all. And here we go. This is perfect. I've also got a breach here, so I can kind of show you guys that. I'm actually going to... Well, I kind of wanted to sneak by it so I can get my charge staff activated, but doesn't really matter. So at the beginning of the breach, you really just want to start off with Stormwave. And one kind of like tip for Flicker Strike is you want to try and have all the mobs on one side of you. So like I cleared out this side, and now I know there should be a big pack over here. So I'm going to look for a Flicker Strike. And as you can see, turns out pretty good. So now I'm going to try and keep all the mobs on this side. Flicker Strike. You know, massive, massive Flicker Strike there. And I mean, that is why the build is so addicting. Once you kind of like start to get a feel for how to make Flicker Strike work really well, and you can kind of get better at it, you know, landing a good Flicker Strike, it's just hard to beat it. It is just so fun. I mean, like that. I mean, it's so hard to beat that. Yeah, so that's going to be the mapping showcase. I'll catch you guys in just a second whenever I'm pulled up at T4 Zesht, and I'll show you guys how that works. And just like that, here we are at T4 Zesht. Now I'm going to try and keep this explanation relatively brief because I don't want to waste any of your guys' time. First things first, there are a couple of support and skill gem changes we need to make. The easiest way to do that is to carry just Sacrifice around in your inventory, just a singular slot. Then you're going to take Profane Ritual out of Reaper's Invocation, replace Herald of Ash, easy peasy. You're going to slap these 3 support gems down into Profane Ritual, and then you're going to replace Reaper's Invocation with Sacrifice, very simple. After that, we have a few support gem changes for Flicker Strike specifically. We just keep those in our Raised Shield gem, which is coming from our second weapon set. Inevitable Critical replaces Pinpoint, Overextend Rapid Attacks, Concentrated Area replaces Ancestral Call. This has to go up in Quarterstaff Strike, and then Elemental Armament replaces Perpetual Charge, and this goes Infernal Cry, into Infernal Cry. And actually something that'll make it a bit easier is if I put Infernal Cry right here. Now we have all of our support gems, very easy. Next is to get our power charges. Sacrifice is going to allow us to use Profane Ritual on our Skelly Boys, which are coming from our Rattling Scepter. So now we just use Profane Ritual, that's going to give us our power charges. Then we can use Charge Staff. Then we just do it one more time in order to get power charges ready to go for our Flicker Strike once the boss fight starts. Since a lot of these bosses do have a bit of an RP phase, you might want to time a Profane Ritual towards the end of them talking just to refresh your power charges, something to keep in mind. Once the boss fight starts, you're going to use Storm Wave 1, 2, 3 times at most. The only thing we're looking to do is apply Chill, Shock, and Ignite for these 3 passive nodes. And then also, obviously, Shock is going to increase our damage as well. And all of the damage that your Flicker Strike does to a boss, or really in general for that matter, is snapshotted via the circumstances when you use Flicker Strike. So an easy example is if your initial hit is rolled as a critical strike, the entire Flicker Strike will crit. If the boss is shocked when you use Flicker Strike, even if the shock falls off, the full Flicker Strike will get the damage benefit. So that's why we want to do it. Obviously, we want to get all those things running right for when we use Flicker Strike, so that way we get the whole benefit throughout the whole thing, and that's due to the snapshot. So once the boss fight starts, we're going to use Stormwave a couple times, like I said, apply the elements. Then once the elements are applied, you're going to use Infernal Cry 3 times in a row, and then you're going to Flicker Strike, and the boss will die. So I'll just go ahead and show that really quick. Obviously, this is a T4 Zesht. You'll be able to tell from the health pool. So now I've got my power charges. Like I said before, I'm going to let him yap for a quick second, and then I'm going to use one more Profane Ritual. And Stormwave. Stormwave, he's ignited. All the elements are applied. So I'm going to Infernal Cry 3 times, and then Flicker Strike. Just like that. And obviously, usually it's a bit quicker than that. You know, I'm a bit smoother, but trying to explain it. When you start to do it, you'll be able to do it very quickly. Just Stormwave, Infernal Cry, Infernal Cry, Infernal Cry, and then Flicker Strike, and the boss will die. And obviously, this works for Uber Arbiter as well. I showed that in the intro. The only difference with Uber Arbiter is you can't actually one-shot him now. He will do a phase where he goes into his, second mode, and he becomes invulnerable for a brief period of time. When he's phasing, all you have to do is weapon swap, Profane Ritual, get like 4 or 5 power charges, and then whenever he's available to be attacked again, you just do the same thing. You don't even have to Infernal Cry at that point because he's quite low on HP. All you have to do is just Flicker Strike, and he'll be dead. And one final little tip to make putting the skill gems back in very easy is take Reaper's Invocation, replace Sacrifice, put Sacrifice where this support gem is, Boundless Energy. Then you can grab Profane Ritual, all of it, the skill and all the support gems, and you can just slap it in just like that, easy peasy. Throw in your Herald of Ash supports, and you're good to go. Of course, swap your Flicker Strike supports if you're about to go do some maps, but I don't need to demonstrate how to swap your supports for you guys. I'm sure you got that handled. Moving on to the remainder of the guide, and I did just want to briefly say that this is by far the most detailed written planner I've made for any of my builds so far. As you can see, this is just the gearing section here, and you can see just how expansive it is. This is broken down into a priority stats section and a trade link section, of course. Always got to include the trade links. Just to clarify on the priority stats really quickly, these are not 100% mandatory, but the best way to think about these would be, if I could help it, I wouldn't buy an item without them. I do kind of explain that up here towards the top if you want to get some more details on my opinion there or my thought process there. But then when you come down, you can find the trade links, of course. And I do have an extra little bit of detail here, which will explain to you how to get an extension. Not really how to, but it just gives you the link to an extension for a Chrome extension. And this will allow you to export items from the trade site into Path of Building and very easily determine whether or not you should actually buy it. Will it be a DPS increase, DPS decrease? Will it improve your defenses, make them worse, etc., etc.? Just to kind of show you an example of that, if I go ahead and open up the ring trade link, and then as normal, I'll go ahead and sort by sum. Here we go. We've got one ring for one divine orb. Be careful with these orb of annulment postings. It's kind of like bugged or whatever. They're like somehow showing up, even though the max price is way below 18 orbs of annulment. The website is just not updated, I suppose, on what the actual price of an orb of annulment is. But of course, I can just click export. This gets added via the Chrome extension that I was just talking about. And then I can come back over here to POB, Control V, and now I can see, okay, one of my rings, it would be a DPS increase. One of my rings, it would be a DPS decrease. If I come down, skip past the Orb of Annulment options, I'll grab another one really quick. Boom, Control V. Okay, it's same thing. DPS increase, DPS decrease, easy peasy. Grab another one, and you get the idea. You can just do this so you can get in a very quick and easy way to determine if it would actually be an upgrade for you. Now, of course, not everything is supported in POB. For example, like the maximum quality here says it's not supported, even though I think it kind of technically is if you like copy paste it from Endgame after you already applied the attack modifiers or already applied the catalyst. But just something to keep in mind. It's not always 100% accurate, but it is very, very helpful. One more thing I wanted to touch on quickly about the gearing section is that this is my exact gear. If I come into game really quick, you can see I have the exact same items on. You'll find these in the POB planner and the written mobalytics planner. No, I do not have gear sitting around somewhere in my stash that I'm like swapping to get better clips. I cannot actually fathom that people will, make that accusation or whatever. With that being said, this is my exact gear and it is not perfect. And in some regard, that was actually intentional because this was not intended to be, here's how you can splurge 150 divines and obviously come up with a build that actually clears the game very easily. This was trying to do it on somewhat of a budget. Of course, Flicker Strike isn't the most budget-friendly skill choice, but this was still relatively budget-friendly. I actually give you guys a rough estimate down here based on the max price that I set in the trade links. You're looking at roughly 15 to 25 divines to end up with something almost identical to what I have. And I've actually got a bunch of examples from the trade links down here. Literally, I opened the trade link, sorted by sum, snapshotted or screenshotted the top option, sorted by sum, and then I pasted that into POB. And then I added an imager link here. You can open this up. You can see the example. And then for some of them, I explained like it was a 21k damage increase, for example. And I'll just bring that back up one more time. This was for 3 divines. So this is like not an expensive ring. The max price on all of these filters or on all of these trade links is relatively low. Feel free to increase or decrease if you need, but just keep in mind if you decrease it by too much, you can't expect to end up in the same position that I'm in right now. But if you actually follow these trade links, your character will be better than mine because, as I explained up here a little bit above, I had to spend a little bit of extra currency in order to figure out what worked and to determine what was important. So that way you guys could ultimately actually do it cheaper via these trade links because I set them up with the information I gathered. And of course, I made a couple mistakes here and there buying some suboptimal things. But, we worked that out and I could only do that via testing. So you guys get to make it for cheap. And that's going to be roughly 15 to 25 divines for the gear and jewels, not including like perfect jeweler's orbs, which are really cheap, for example. I don't have any level 21 corrupted skill gems. It really is basically just gear jewels, perfect jeweler's orbs, and like gem cutter prisms, I guess. That's pretty much really it. I just have a level 20 flicker strike, a level 20 storm wave, a level 21 flicker strike is like 6 divines, which I want to buy that immediately as soon as I finish making this video. I just didn't want to buy it in advance because that's going to increase the budget. That's like 1/5 the budget of the whole build currently, so I'm going to hold off on that. In the next update, the next guide is going to be like 100 divine minimum budget, essentially, to really showcase the true full potential of the build if you want to kind of get silly and spend like crazy amounts of currency on the character. And I think that's going to wrap it up for the gearing section. Like I said, there's just so much information here. And truthfully, there is a lot of information to provide. It would make this video get really, really long if I tried to go through all the little details. So rather, I think it's better to just leave the super detailed, like nitty-gritty stuff here, kind of leave that out of the video. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you like that or if you'd prefer that I continue to go over the nitty-gritty. I'm perfectly okay doing both, but, 30-minute videos are a bit long in my opinion, so it's just something I'm trying. Moving on to the skill gems, same here. I'm not going to cover everything like I usually do. I'm only going to cover kind of like the particulars or some of the important things. Starting off with Ambrosia and Flicker Strike, you really want to make sure that you get an ultimate mana flask with increased charges, because Ambrosia is going to use up 20% of your flask charges, give you 3% of damage as extra lightning damage for each charge that it takes. By default, your flask has 75 charges, so it would take up 15 charges for an additional 45% damage. Mine here has 123 charges, which is giving me basically, it's going to use up 24, give or take, charges for a total of like 75% increased damage instead of just 45%. So you get a lot of additional value there, and a mana flask with these modifiers, which you guys actually can't see it over there, but a mana flask with these modifiers is like 1 exalted tops. So, it's very, very cheap for a lot of value. In addition to that, of course, we have the support gem swap for mapping and bossing. This is extensively detailed in the written planner. I don't feel like I should go over everything here, but the short and sweet of it is for mapping, we're giving up damage for more efficiency, more AoE, more hits, things of that nature, more attack speed as well in case you ever get surrounded. It's a little bit nice to be able to get the skill off just a bit quicker, but truthfully, once you get some energy shield, you shouldn't really be getting stunned very much. So, if you feel like you're lacking damage, feel free to just drop rapid attacks for one of these. It would probably be Elemental Armament would be the best choice. And then the only other thing I'll mention is we're using Pinpoint Critical for mapping and Inevitable Critical for bossing. In both scenarios, mapping or bossing, you need to make sure that your Flicker Strike is 100% crit chance. I know mine says 96.7, but that's because we're using charge regulation, which whenever we consume power charges from that, we get 25% more crit chance. So now that I consumed a power charge, which charge regulation does that for you, just to be clear, you can see I'm up to 100%. Also, my Storm Wave, well, I lost my power charge, but my Storm Wave also goes up to 100%, of course. So that's very valuable. We have a ton of crit damage bonus nodes on the passive tree. Critting on Flicker Strike is extremely important, and being able to crit 100% of the time is that much more important, truthfully. If you don't crit, you're going to do maybe half the boss's HP, potentially even less. So it's very, very important that you have 100%. Moving on from the skills, though, because everything else is very self-explanatory, I believe. Just to briefly talk about the spirit gems. So in regards to how much spirit you're going to need, you need 200 spirit exactly if you want to mimic my setup, which is obviously what I would recommend. Let me go ahead and throw in my correct support gems here, all my stuff here, so you can actually see. So as you can see, with everything turned on, I have 3 spirit left over. You need exactly 200. This is actually very easy to achieve through Lead Me Through Grace. You need specifically a chest piece with 400 energy shield and 1000 evasion, and that will give you an additional 100 spirit. If you're on a budget, my recommendation would be to not get an unset ring, which is how we actually are able to use Ghost Dance. Therefore, you would only need 170 spirit to begin with, because we're not using Ghost Dance at that point because you don't have the unset ring. And then you can get a cheaper chest piece as well because you don't need as much spirit. So that's just, you know, a potential idea if you are trying to make this work on a budget. I was doing that before, and I wasn't even working on a budget. I just didn't get around to getting an unset ring until pretty late because I didn't really feel like I needed it, but the build got to the point where I'm obliterating everything via my damage. So kind of the only thing really left to pursue there is either killing pinnacle bosses in 2 seconds instead of 3 seconds, and also becoming nearly immortal. So I started pushing towards becoming nearly immortal. Getting the unset ring for Ghost Dance obviously helps with that. Beyond that, the only other thing I could think of to really talk about with the spirit skills, everything else should be very clear. The only other thing would be the Herald choices. So I've flip-flopped these over and over and over again. Like in here, I still have Herald of Ice. And essentially, the way I look at it is Herald of Ice doesn't work on Delirium mobs pretty much because you can never freeze them effectively. And since I'm always doing Delirious instilled maps, to me it seems like Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ash is kind of like the only thing that really makes sense. With that being said, if you're not doing Delirious maps and you do have enough cold damage on your gear, which previously I was trying to make use of Herald of Ice, so that's why I do actually have a lot of cold damage on my gear. You can even see my Flicker Strike actually does more cold damage than lightning damage. This kind of changes once I get Charge Staff active and all that stuff, but I have a lot of cold damage, so I was freezing, but even with that, I just ended up going back to Herald of Thunder, Herald of Ash, because it just feels better. I just don't like the fact that there's so many Delirious mobs, and I'm not getting the value of Herald of Ice. Also, especially in Simulacrum, which this build did complete T4 Simulacrum, to be clear. Granted, you can't use Flicker Strike in Simulacrum. I'll touch on that in just a moment, but yeah, ultimately, I think Herald of Thunder, Herald of Ash is the combo. Like, literally, if you pull up 10 monks on POE Ninja, all 10 of them are pretty much using a different combination of heralds, so all that to say, it's really up to you. But if I were to choose, it'd be Herald of Ash, Herald of Thunder, of course. And finally, the last major topic I'm going to touch on, I will do kind of like a Q&A sort of thing in here in just a minute, but the last major topic is going to be the passive tree. I do have a detailed explanation for that on the written planner as well. Simply put, though, to make it kind of short and sweet, you really shouldn't transition or try to play this build until you're roughly level 85. And the way that I kind of demonstrate that in the written planner is as long as you're able to get everything prior to this node. So if you can get all of these notables, if the only ones you can't get are, I'll zoom in up here really quick. The only thing you can't get is Melding, Immaterial, Echoing Frost, Echoing Flames, Echoing Thunder, then you can go ahead and transition and you can get these things afterwards. But you pretty much need everything else because you need all the crit nodes, you need all the power charge nodes, you need some of the damage nodes, you need some of the defensive nodes. But essentially here towards the end, we're really just getting mainly defense, and then we're getting a couple of juicy damage nodes in the triple element cluster. But like those aren't mandatory. Like the build will function without that, but the build is really not going to function whatsoever without the power charges, for example. So you really have to be roughly level 85 before you swap over to this. I have my YouTube video for my previous guide, the leveling guide for this build, linked here. So if you are making a new character, I highly recommend go follow that guide. It is extremely helpful. I finished the entire campaign in 3 hours and 30 minutes, which is, you know, stupidly quick. That build is just absolutely amazing for the campaign. It gives you all the detail you need, trade links, etc., etc. And then once you finish the campaign, to get from 65 to 85, simply the easiest way to go about it, or what I did and what I would recommend, and I explain it here, is basically grab everything. Like you're on that passive tree, you just finished the campaign, keep that passive tree, and then grab anything that you see here that isn't crit chance, crit damage, or power charges. You don't need any of that stuff to continue playing that build. You can just keep rocking with Stormwave. Stormwave will be more than fine to get you to level 85. Absolutely no problem. Then once you're level 85, you've got a new weapon. You should get a quarterstaff around that time because obviously the previous video or the previous guide is Hollow Palm. For this, you're going to need a quarterstaff. It is just, as far as I'm concerned, like if you're not using a quarterstaff, you're making a huge mistake. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I think you're making a huge mistake. Flicker Strike does not scale well with attack speed whatsoever. It basically does nothing for you. So the attack speed that you're getting from Hollow Palm, which is one of the main benefits of it, is doing you very little good, if any at all. So you really need to get a quarterstaff, and in specific, as I explained up in the gearing section, you're going to need one with some base crit chance or additional base crit chance to help you get up to 100% crit chance for Flicker Strike. You grab that, equip that, swap your passive tree at the same time, and then you're going to be pretty much good to go. You can start rocking with Flicker Strike. You won't, if you don't buy any of the other pieces of gear yet, you might not be 100% of the way there, but the build will be functional, which is the important part. And now finally, just a quick little sort of Q&A section. Here's some of the stats of my character. As you can see, we've got 12,000 evasion. Of course, we're resist capped, minus chaos. Could you take chaos inoculation? Of course you could, but I personally don't recommend it. I don't think it's bad by any means, but I think if you have the opportunity to go evasion plus energy shield, when the combination of those two defensive layers together is so unbelievably strong, I feel like it's kind of odd to not do it. And if you do go Chaos Inoculation, you kind of have to go a bit more out of your way to get a lot more of these like fat energy shield nodes. Like you really would need to come up here, grab Patient Barrier. You would need to grab Dampening Shield, Pure Energy. Whereas if you just stick with Evasion Energy Shield, you can still be extremely tanky, but most of the good nodes are like right next to you, so you don't have to path very far away. And of course, there are some really good nodes over here. Spectral Ward, this whole cluster right here, Mindful Awareness, of course, Subterfuge Mask. Some people seem to believe that Subterfuge Mask is like not worth it anymore, but I, for one, disagree. And if you go look on POE Ninja, clearly people are still using it. It is still a very popular node, so I think it kind of goes without saying that it's worth taking. If I were to take it off, just to show you, I'm at 53% evasion. If I actually take it off, I go all the way down to 40%. So it's giving me, it's giving me damn near 5,000 evasion. Like, how could it really be that bad? I can't really begin to understand why people would view it that way. But as far as I'm concerned, it's absolutely insane. Potentially even worth anointing, because you could then save these points, but we are anointing some other stuff. We're anointing Storm Charged. I cover this in the written planner. Your only other option for an anoint would be Tribal Fury as far as I'm concerned. This will give you more AoE, so it's better for mapping. Storm Charge is more well-rounded. It's good for mapping, and it's really good for bossing. Tribal Fury, of course, does nothing for bosses, so it's kind of why I'm using Storm Charge for the most part. Beyond that, I'll quickly add that getting 20% quality on almost every single skill gem that we have is very important for this build. You're getting good benefits for practically all of them, except maybe Wind Dancer, and that's really it as far as I'm concerned. I think pretty much everything else is quite valuable, so I would highly recommend adding quality to all of your other skills. And then on top of that, if you can afford it, you should heavily consider getting a level 21 Corrupted Flicker Strike, just to kind of illustrate how valuable it is. My average damage for Flicker Strike via my POB is 376,000 at the moment. If I go up by one level, I get roughly 30,000 extra damage, which it's going to be extremely hard at this point, because level 21 Corrupted Flicker Strike is about 5-6 Divine. It would be nearly impossible to get the same level of damage increase spending 5 to 6 Divine anywhere else. Like, it's not even going to be close. Like, you can go spend 80 Divine on a really well-rolled Heart of the Well jewel, and you might get 30,000 average damage. So it's very, very valuable to go and grab your level 21 skill gem as soon as you can. And then also, as far as unique jewels go, since I did just mention Heart of the Well, the From Nothing Diamond is very, very cheap. It's roughly 3 to 5 annulment orbs. This allows you, specifically the one for Zealot's Oath passive, this allows you to get these 3 nodes right here, which for me is like, at the point that my character's at, it's roughly 45,000 extra average damage, which is obviously a lot. Once again, like, that's another example of you're not going to beat that. That's so much bang for your buck, so you definitely should. And yeah, I'm not 100% sure if there's really anything else that I could think of that's super important to cover. Of course, in the future, we're going to get gloves with attack speed jewel or runes. We're going to get boots with movement speed runes. Right now, we're supplementing our chaos res via our gloves because, our chaos res is, without this, it would be sub 55%, which really isn't bad. I don't think that would be getting us killed at all, but, putting in an iron rune here isn't going to do us any good because there's such low evasion and energy shield on the piece. But obviously the attack speed runes are like $1 billion at the moment, so I didn't want to include those in this guide. I'm trying to make sure that you guys can clearly see that you do not need to spend, you don't need to throw the bank at this to get it to be extremely powerful, but you can't just spend 5 divines and expect it to one-shot T4 Zesht or T4 Arbiter. I think minimum budget is probably 10 to 15 divines if you want to have a good time. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I think I'll go ahead and wrap it up there and close the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, really appreciate it if you head down below, smash the like button. More importantly, hit subscribe. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy, chefs.